Hi, everyone. I'm Jenna Paone with A Mighty Blaze, and I'm so thrilled today. I have the fabulous writing and blogging duo, Heather Cox and Jessica Morgan of the famous and infamous GoFugYourself.com, the authors of The Royal We and their newest release, The HEIR Affair. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
How you doing today? We've already been like laughing backstage,
I'm doing better now that we've had like a little gossip sesh.
Right?
Now I'm chill.
We've had a good little chat. You said earlier, we're doing as well as can be expected under the circumstances.
Exactly.
But I'm so thrilled to be able to talk with you both today. I'm a huge fan of your blog. I've been following Go Fug Yourself for an embarrassing number of years. And I was saying my friends and I used to email each other blog posts. That's how far back my fandom goes. Huge fan of The Royal We. And now it's follow up The HEIR Affair. It's so good. I was so thrilled when I found out you guys were writing this. I was like, are you kidding? Because I've read The Royal We probably like 8 times. I know that I'm one of those people that reads things over and over again, and I listen to the audiobooks and stuff, but I love the royals. I love disappearing into this world. So we are going to get into it today.
Great, let's do it.
First, I'm going to introduce these lovely ladies. This is the embarrassing part where I sit and read your praises for like minutes. I'm going to make it quick, but Heather Cox and Jessica Morgan are the creators of the internet's wittiest, longest standing celebrity fashion blog, Go Fug Yourself, which made Entertainment Weekly's must list and The Guardian's list of 50 most powerful blogs. They are the authors of the smashingly successful novel, The Royal We, where an American girl, Rebecca Bex Porter, tries to win the heart of the heir to the British throne, Prince Nicholas Lyons. They have also penned 2 young adult novels, Spoiled and Messy, and have written for publications ranging from New York Magazine to Vanity Fair, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Cosmopolitan, W Magazine, and Glamour. Their newest release, The HEIR Affair, is a charming follow-up to The Royal We that explores the question of whether there really is such a thing as happily ever after. After a scandalous secret turns their fairy tale wedding into a nightmare, Bex Porter and her husband, Prince Nicholas, are in self-imposed exile as they try to protect their fledgling marriage. But when a crisis forces the new Duke and Duchess back to London, the band-aid they placed over their problems starts to peel at the edges. As old family secrets and new ones threaten to derail their new royal life, Bex has to face the emotional wreckage she and Nick left behind, with the Queen, with the world, and with Nick's brother Freddie, whose sins may not be so easily forgotten nor forgiven. Of The HEIR Affair, Publishers Weekly says it's irresistibly fun. There's real heart in this escapist romp, and royal watchers and romance fans alike will be left hungry for another sequel. Kirkus Reviews calls it a juicy look behind the gilded curtain of palace life, and Booklist says readers will rejoice to be reunited with Bex, Nick, Freddie, and the colorful cast of supporting characters. It's a fast-paced, funny, and enjoyable read. Ladies, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you so much for having us. We are delighted to be here.
I am delighted to have you. Let's get into it. All right, first up, The HEIR Affair. This is your follow-up to The Royal We, which, is loosely based on real life struggles of the royals. It's Wills and Kate, it's the royal family, but it's with a twist. It's obviously entirely fictionalized, but it appeals to so many royal watchers and royal fans. What is it about the royals that interests you so much, and what do you think it is that interests us as Americans overall so much about them?
That's a tough one. I think, for me, I think they just sort of were a fact of my life growing up. I lived in England from when I was 6 to when I was about 13. And so those are pretty formative years, and they were just very much present. Like, she was on the money, she was on the stamps, she was on the mailboxes, she was everywhere. Yep. And so they were just sort of baked into my upbringing. I don't think we wrote the book because we're interested in the royals per se, so much as we were interested in sort of, to use the tired old analogy of how like the duck looks so serene on top of the lake, but underneath it's the paddling. We were interested in the paddling. We were interested in the frenzy of like what happens. It's this idea of fame that is bestowed and not sought. or that is given to you not because you were excellent at something, but because of just sort of the accident of your birth. And you just sort of were born into this royal situation, and like now you're famous, you're one of the most famous people in the world, and like that's never going to change. And so from birth, people like William and Harry have been celebrities, and they never really got a say in the matter. And so when you combine that with falling in love with someone and trying to be sort of a regular person, and that person comes from a completely, as you would imagine, like regular background, getting it, like when those worlds collide, there's a lot of fallout. There's a lot of the wistfulness for Nick of, wishing that he had that kind of a normal upbringing. And then, there's Bex's sister Lacey, who sort of struggles with, well, now my sister's super famous and she's living this life that I always thought sounded really great and it's glamorous, and like, but there's no place for me in it, because of all these rules about decorum and protocol and whatever, that it's like, it affects more than just you, it affects your whole family. There's ripple effects, and suddenly going from zero to the most famous person in the world. We saw Kate do it. And to a different degree, we saw Meghan do it, because also Meghan was obviously already well known, but her level of fame just skyrocketed after her engagement. And I think we've had to watch both of them cope with it in different ways. I just think that's an interesting dynamic, and so that's really why we wanted to write the book, was to be like, there's no way that this is easy, and there is no way that it's not painful at times, and we wanted to sort of dig into that.
Yeah, you really have done a wonderful job with that, making them real people, making their struggles relatable even in this world. Like, I love how personable they are and how real life they are, which you must imagine behind the curtain, the royals really are like that to an extent. They're not total robots, I'm sure. I'm sure there's some life. Maybe, I don't know.
I like to imagine it. Like, I love imagining the idea that, like, it's a rainy, cold day in London, then William decides that he's just going to watch a Real Housewives marathon on his, VPN, his like stolen Bravo app or something. I don't know. I feel like all that stuff reminds you that they're people too.
And I was going to say, just like for the purpose, obviously, of writing a book, if your characters aren't relatable or likable, like, why is anyone going to go on the journey with you if they're like uptight asshole robots behind the scenes? Some of them are, in fact, robots, but not our protagonists, or else you're not going to go on that
comes to mind, but she is lovable for her roboticness. She's
not really a robot. She's just very
proper,
organized.
Organized is a nice way to put it. Now, in The Royal, we wrapped up so well at the end. I mean, I really did feel like you guys tied up all these loose ends. You really justified the ending of that book. I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it yet. If you haven't, please go out and do. And you both have hinted in previous interviews that you didn't have an interest in, or you didn't have a goal of writing a sequel. What made you decide to revisit this? And was it a challenge as you to then dive back into the story and craft, unravel all of the ends you'd tied up so well?
Yeah, we did not, this was never planned to be like a multi-book series or anything. We always thought that it was kind of a one and done. And people reacted very kindly to the first book, to The Royal We, which was obviously great. And a lot of people sort of wanted to know what happened next. And I think after a while, we sort of, we always say that, like, when you write a book, it's kind of like, I don't have any children, but Heather assures me that it's kind of like giving birth, where it's a lot of work and it hurts. And when you're done, you have this thing you really love, but like, you maybe don't want to do it again immediately. Right. And it takes a while for you to be like, oh, I think I'm ready to try this again. So it took us a little while to get back into like the mental form for it. Mm-hmm. I have such respect for authors who are really prolific, because I think it is very hard to be prolific. But, around when Harry and Meghan got married, we wrote a little Kindle single that we were going to put out that was about Freddie and like stuff he was doing. And that Kindle single is no longer in existence. None of it ended up in the book. But once it was done, our agent was kind of like, you guys, like, I think this is good. Maybe why don't you try and like write a whole book? I'm sure she was like, please write another book. It's
Please
been
write another book.
and so I think, I honestly think once we had like gotten the ball rolling again to write that, even as a writing exercise, we sort of felt like, oh, okay, like we can do this. But part of the reason it sort of also took so long was that, and I've said this before, when you have a romantic comedy or a romance of any sort where the couple ends up together at the end, and that is like your primary driving force of the narrative of the first book, for a sequel, you really do want to think carefully, like what story is left to tell, because we're not going to break them up just to like go through the intellectual exercise of getting them back together.
Right. Yeah.
So it took some time for us to be like, what the heck are we going to write about? Right.
I mean, it's so interesting to me because it almost seems inevitable, like that you would have written the sequel, because it's such an interesting premise of like that after the happy ever after, which is, I think you do it better than many people have attempted to do, where, the problems don't go away, they only continue, but you have them deal with them in a very realistic way. Again, I'm trying to be very vague so I don't.
No, thank you. I mean, I think that was part of it for us, was sort of like, we don't want to invalidate anything we did at the end of the royal we, because I think all of those scenes and how everybody felt in those moments is still totally honest. Yes. But I also think that, when you move on from that point, realistically, it's like I think you look back and you think, oh, maybe those moments were honest, and those moments were maybe also those characters were like, this is really how I want to feel right now. Yeah. And I'm gonna just make sure that that's how I feel right now. And then later you sort of realize that no, there's actually still we just put a Band-Aid on that wound, but it's still festering under there. And I think that's realistic too. So we wanted to handle it in a way that felt, it's not like we were saying, just kidding, the end of the whole first book was a lie. Like it wasn't that. It was that, it felt right in that moment to all of those people, but these feelings that have come afterward also feel right to those people.
Yes. No, and it really does. You've really earned it in this book. Again, it stands on its own. Obviously, it helps to have read the first one, but it does stand on its own as a legitimate journey for all of the characters. Now, it starts in 2016, and obviously, a lot has happened in the royal family in real life, and you do have, again, in this book, you have little hints at things that happened, after the wedding. There's little incidences and things that I'm like, oh, I remember that story breaking, or things like that. And then there's this very odd thing that happened where you almost like predicted sort of the exit of the of the Sussex says, I should have just said Harry and Meghan from the royal family, and in a way that Nick and Bex are sort of fleeing at the beginning. To what how do you balance referencing real life things? And I know that your storyline came before that actually happened. Obviously, the book was already at the publisher by then. But how do you balance the the real life happenings with the necessary creative liberties that you have to take to write a good piece of fiction? And do you ever feel like you're clairvoyant?
Yeah, a little bit. I think for us, I mean, obviously we wrote Royal We before Harry and Meghan even met. Yes. And when Heather and I were writing it, we made our protagonist an American because we sort of thought we didn't have the writerly ability to channel a Brit in a first person narrative. And we did have a discussion where we were like, is this too far-fetched for him to marry an American? It turns out no. So yeah, as far as that goes, when that actually came to pass, although obviously Harry is in a different position than William is in the royal family, but regardless, we were kind of like, this is very surreal and quite exciting, and really fun. So that was exciting. And yeah, I mean, this book was finished and at the publisher before anything happened with Harry and Meghan deciding to step back from their role as senior royals. And I think this is kind of a two-part answer. For the first book, we definitely used the main tentpole moments from William and Kate's relationship as a guiding light for our plot, because it was very juicy.
It had good natural plot milestones. Thanks, guys.
Yep. I know. And then for this book, we kind of wanted to really sort of go off into real fiction. So we would use some stuff that was based in fact, but this one is definitely sort of more off in the realm of the fictional. But yeah, I mean, sometimes stuff happens that's too juicy to like keep out, or even stuff that we think is sort of funny. Like in this book, there's a very short runner about Bex gets a portrait painted of her and it's hideous and she hates it. And that is in fact based on the fact that Kate Middleton's official portrait is hideous, and it is surprisingly often out for cleaning at the gallery. So like Heather and I have been twice to the National Portrait Gallery, and both times it was not there. And we've had other people be like, I went there and it also was not there. It was out for cleaning. Like, how dirty is this one portrait really getting, you guys? So our kind of like inside joke was that Kate herself really hates that portrait and like makes you take it down more often than you would normally. So like something like that, which is a little bit of an in joke for our readers, but is also like a funny runner. We definitely use stuff like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love the hall of shame of the other portraits, which is you guys have all these lovely little touches. On that note, you mentioned the National Portrait Gallery. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your research process for the book and the trips you took, because you do such a great job in both of these books of, it's a rom-com and it's fun, but I actually always learn something about the monarchy. I learn about, I also lived in London for a time, and I'm very familiar with these places and have visited, but I still felt like I learned a lot about the history. I feel like there's a great deal of respect for the legacy and the history and British history as well as American. Can you talk a little bit about your research and whether, especially like your views of the palaces and things like that, did you get any special access, or were you just on the group tour?
We did the tour. Yeah, we unfortunately, I wish I had known back then. Like now for the rest of my life, if we're ever like, we need to go somewhere to write a book, we're going to go. Because if I had known that we would be in this situation now, I would have been like, Jessica, we're going on another research tour and we're going tomorrow. So we did one for the Royal We. We had already done the outline. We kind of started writing, but I think we knew we needed to go and get some, because we'd both been, but I think there's something about going with a very specific agenda where you are looking at it as a place to set a story where you're seeing things in a different way. And so we did a trip. I will never forget, we flew over on New Year's Day. January was not maybe the sexiest time to go to London, although it actually worked out great. But we spent a day just like walking, just ambling around Oxford and just kind of drinking that in, and going into the various places. My sister went to Oxford. She was in Pembroke. So we chose Pembroke because it was kind of small. And also one of those ones that you can, and I've been in it. Do I remember it? Not so well. We were having a little bit, remember hooch, that like bottled, there was a lot of hooch that night. Of many varieties, specifically hooch.
Too.
So I don't remember it as well. I know there was a common room, but anyway, she didn't live in it, but it was her college. And so we picked that one for, nostalgic reasons, but also just, we felt like we could make the leaps that we might need to make as people who had not actually gone there. Whereas if you pick like a super famous one, there's all kinds of people who can be like, but anyway, so we wandered around there. We went to Sketch, which they have tea at Sketch in the book. We'd identified some places to like maybe we can, this seems like it might be a fun location. Let's go there. Or a Sketch may have even just been, someone recommended it to us as a good place for tea. And we were like, we have to put this in the book.
I love Sketch.
We went, the Buckingham Palace tour at the time was only open 2 times a year. It was open selectively in winter and selectively in summer. And so we went when we knew we could get in, because I'd never been, because when I lived over there, I don't think they opened it to the public until 2000.
Yeah.
So I'd never been inside, and we went and we did that. It was so great. And so that was the 2 of us with notebooks, writing down everything, asking super.
I thought we were nuts because
like, how often do you clean the chandeliers? How often does this happen? They were sort of like, okay.
You clean the chandeliers.
Yeah, they lower them down like twice a year and clean them and then put them back up. But like we were writing down like, oh look, that outlet is gold, or like that, like things like that. And there are a couple of those little descriptions that made it into the book, and because we were like, that's that's the stuff where honestly, in all of these books, there's no way we can really know. We don't know what the private apartments are ever going to look like in any of these places.
Right.
So we were like, our job is to try to make as much of this live and breathe and feel real as possible, so that when we have to make the leaps, people take them with us. And so we tried to put as much authenticity as we could into scenes that were written in the public rooms of Buckingham Palace, or in Oxford, or in Sketch, or any of those places, because we were like, there are going to be times when we're flying blind, and people are going to be more likely to go with us if they feel like the rest of it is true. I really like this book, honestly, was mostly Google. We traveled through Google, and we had to make up for that a little bit by creating locations that were fanciful in that way, like apartment 1A, Kensington Palace, when they had that's given to them. But we kind of looked at the interiors for when Princess Margaret lived there, and then made up the rest.
I've actually been in apartment 1A.
Nice.
Like, purely, yes, because this is very weird. A really long ages ago, I can't even remember what year it was, but a long time ago. She was dead.
Yep.
Obviously. And they were using it for an arts exhibit about Lord Snowdon's photography. It was the summer I happened to be in the UK with my family in London, and we did get to go through part of 1A. But I mean, obviously it was totally different, and there wasn't any furniture because they had all the art up. But I did remember that you got to, I don't remember how you got in, but you left out through like the little garden. There's like a little garden there, and you went out like the back door through their little garden and out into the park. So I have been in it, but like, you're like, how much can you take from that? It's not at all as fit the way it really is.
Right. But that's still really cool. Every now and then you get lucky with a thing of really getting
God, we're not getting lucky. We are the dumb idiots.
Yes.
I think I'm pretty sure this was my fault. We had booked our Buckingham Palace tour. There's only so many. I think there's like 2 a day, maybe 3. And slim window of time. And I think there weren't any more. This was like the last day of our trip that we could possibly have done it. And we showed up for I think it was like our 2:30 tour, and we were there kind of early. We were there maybe half an hour early. So we went and killed time somewhere, and then showed up at 2:30, and the guys were like, your tour was at 2. The guys at the gate were like, and we were like, but we have our tickets. And they were like, yeah, that tour already happened. You missed it. And we were like, oh my God. And they were like, yeah, the next one's sold out. And we were clearly just so like, we're stupid. I'm stupid. I misread it. Like, I just didn't like, and so they were like, come back at the next time of the next tour. It's at like 4 o'clock or whatever time it was. We wrote down, they're like, come back.
We did write down.
Basically like pointed us out to the tour guard, and they were like, I'm sure they were like, here are these really pleasant, apologetic, and super dumb Americans who totally messed up.
Ticket.
Let us come in on the tour. But after they checked everybody else in first, and then they were sort of like, yes, okay, you guys can come in. And we were like,
very kind.
So we were also, while we were taking notes, we were like, this is good because they'll know how much this meant to us. So we were like writing everything down. And then
we get liner note thank yous, those guards.
What's that?
Did they get liner note thank yous?
Yes, we did them.
And so we ended up chatting afterwards because they gave us champagne at the end, not just us, everyone, it's part of it. You got champagne at the end, and we ended up chatting with the tour guide who let us in, and like she'd been in Windsor the day that the castle caught on fire, and so was my mother, and so we were like having a moment. And then so we were the last ones standing, and I don't know how everybody left. I'm assuming everyone left this way, but for whatever reason, she walked us out. It was just us and her, and she walked us out through the front. So we walked out through the front gate of Buckingham Palace across that like courtyard where they put the birth announcements and stuff, and then out the front gate. And I'm like, can you imagine, like, if you're just a tourist, like taking your night picture of Buckingham Palace, and then these 2 like yahoos are casually escorted out the front gate, do you think like, who are they? Are they like, is that like someone's private secretary? Is that, who is that? And we were just 2 yahoos.
Oh, I love that. That's so
it was great. Fun. But I was like, oh, thank God. But yeah, boy, everyone check your friggin' tour guide times.
Yes, and they only do the tours when the queen isn't in residence. That's why, that's why they only do them like select times of year. So, I would highly recommend that as well. Buckingham Palace is so cool. I mean, all of the palaces are so.
Windsor is always the best for me, but yeah, seeing Buckingham Palace was incredible because that's a place that, like, for my whole life, it was opaque to me. Growing up over there, and like you take your taxis around town, you're walking around town, and you take tourists who are like people who are coming to visit you. You're like, well, there's Buckingham Palace. All right, anyway, next. And like you never got a peek behind it. And to get to do that, my mother still has not gotten to do it, and that bums me out. Someday I'd like to take her back over there to see it, because
she never gets to leave the country again.
I know.
We got
forever allowed.
I know we got a press release today from the royal palaces, and they're opening the moat at Windsor.
Yes,
Visitors
gardens.
only for children, which I feel, parents and children, and I feel a little rejected by this, but just FYI, guys, if we ever get to go anywhere ever again, maybe you can go in a moat.
Yes, and if any Brits are watching, go hang out at Windsor.
Go get in a moat.
Yeah, go
Get in the moat. Do it for all of us, please.
Oh, I love this. Back to the book first. Good. You know, ostensibly what we're here to talk about. I would actually just share London stories all day. But one of the hallmarks of this particular of the Heir Affair is throughout the royal we, the presence of Queen Eleanor is she's very elusive in that book, understandably so, because Bex at the time would not have access to her. And in this book, she's much more front and center. And I just love their relationship. I love it when it's bad. I love it when it's good. I love all of it, because Eleanor, you guys just, you've really nailed her, like this great character. And obviously Eleanor has a life event that causes her to maybe make some changes and experiment a little bit. Did you guys did you know that you wanted to show this relationship more in depth, and you know, why did you decide that like that this was a good relationship to feature in this book, in this sequel?
I think part of it was we looked at the board, so to speak, and we said we have, you know, we can, as we're developing storylines for people. I know you talk about Richard, who is Nick and Freddie's dad, and you look at everyone else and you're kind of like, well, I guess like the dad storylines can be interesting, but like we have this strong female character who we've established in the first book as a bit, like you said, elusive, like she's there, but she is much like the palace to me. She was opaque to Bex. And just only kind of interacted with her when she had a specific motivation, and was almost always treated as this object, this person to fear, or at least be extremely nervous about. And we were like, let's not waste that, you know. We have, and because of course, as we were talking, we were like, how far do we want this book to go? What do we want it to be? And at one point we were like, what if it ends with Nick as king? And then we were like, you know how many people would have to die in this book for that to happen? And we were like, as we're plowing through the pile of bodies, like, we don't want to waste the bodies. So we were like, let's take a look at this. Like, we've set up this royal family where all of the women that are queens are extremely long reigning and long lived, and the men are not. And it's like, well, let's have fun with the one that we have then. So we were like, let's explore that relationship, because, as you know, it's Bex is going to end up being queen of a sort. And this is, you know, they're the only people that understand that position, such as it is. And so it's like, let's have them interact. Let's have them be more to each other, even if it's not always friends, even if sometimes they're at each other's throats. It felt like that was a natural next step. And, you know, we were like, let's put some more multi-textured, multi-layered women into this.
I vote for more Eleanor all the time, but it's really, it is actually hard to pick a favorite character. I mean, everyone is so lovable. Bex's voice is amazing. I mean, she just does you guys managed to write a character, a central romantic character who is not like a sort of milquetoast ingenue, which I really appreciate. You know, she is dynamic and smart and interesting, and not of the necessarily, you know, the princess, duchess, queen mold. So it's always really interesting to see her try to fit into this world. She's the fish out of water. And then all of the characters, I mean, everyone, Richard, Nick, Eleanor, Freddie, of course, is always going to be the fan favorite. B, as I've said, I have a love for, obviously, Gaz. Do you both have a character that holds a special place in your heart, or maybe one you found a little bit easier to write, and maybe one that you found a little more difficult to write?
That is a good question. I think B is probably my favorite to write. She's fun. I mean, leaving our Nick to the side of the secondary and the tertiary ones. I mean, obviously Freddie is fun to write, but I always think of Freddie as being kind of like one of the main characters. I do have to say that I like having terrible things happen to Freddie, which is a thing I think authors sometimes feel about characters they really love in like a paradoxical way. We like to torture them. But I really enjoy writing B. I think she's so sort of funny and like astringent in a way that is very enjoyable to write. I will say in terms of difficulty in writing people, you know, I can't speak for Heather, obviously. I think for me, because it is a first person piece and we're in Bex's head so much, I sometimes will find myself writing a scene and everybody sounds like Bex. And then you kind of have to go back through and like, or I have to go back through my parts and be like, that's very Bexy. Like I have to de-Bex this conversation a little bit. Like it can't be two Bexes talking to each other. I have to work on the other person a little bit.
I think for me, it would be Richard is the one I find the hardest because he's the one I think is like there were a lot of versions of this book where he played a bigger part throughout, and in the end I think the instinct is sort of right, at least for now, that it's like less is more with him because he is kind of a, you know, he's hard to write without making him just like a one note cold fish. And I think, you know, we've tried really hard to give him layers without redeeming those parts of his personality, that like it's not like being sad about the way your life has gone or whatever redeems any of the terrible parenting that you did or whatever. So like we having to walk that line where you're like, you don't want to find this person unpleasant on every level, but we're also not trying to like suddenly give him qualities that make you be like, oh, but he's just a marshmallow inside. Like, you know, we didn't want that. But it's a hard balance to walk with him. And I actually had a lot of fun being a crotchety old lady myself. I had a lot of fun writing Marta, the Queen Mother, in this one, and to another extension, Eleanor. But like I had a lot of fun with Marta. I feel like we all have a Dowager Countess from Downton Abbey living inside of us, and this was my way of tapping into that.
And she's such a great one with the cane and with the Twitter, you know, she has, for those of you out there, she's got a secret Twitter alias at one point, which is very fun to watch. Going off of that, let's talk about craft for a little bit and about how, you know, you are a team who writes this book, which I'm endlessly fascinated by. I have a history, I'm a songwriter, and I often write with people as a songwriter. That's a very common thing, that you collaborate with people in songs. I've never attempted to do it in any other, in my fiction writing. So I'm interested in how your writing relationship works, how you balance the workload. What's the process like? Does one of you work on it and send it to the other, or do you outline first? Tell me a little bit about your partnership, and obviously your partners on the blog as well. So how do you manage these two huge creative undertakings? You must be very organized, both of you.
I will.
I don't know if organized is the right word. Tired would be one. I mean, I think one thing that's nice about it is, you know, when you're writing something, like I think a lot of writers aren't writers as their only job. And so you have to squeeze in that writing around other things. And whenever you're doing that, there's a lot of guilt, because if you have to do the other thing, nothing's happening with the book. Well, at least with the two of us, if we're working on the book, we can kind of be like, okay, I will take, like, instead of trying to split our blog post responsibilities in half for the day, like I'll handle more of it, or you know what, I'll handle the whole site for the next 2 days. You handle the book. And then we'll kind of treat it in waves like that, which is helpful, because it means like, yeah, whenever I finish a segment on the book and I send it to Jessica, like it's not sitting there dormant just because I'm not working on it. Like it's growing, it's thriving. Like she's taking it to she's making it better. She's adding something to it. Like it's got life, and I can take a mental even though like taking a break from typing one thing by typing another thing can be surprisingly, like it's really bad for your circulation. Everybody stand up, move around. I don't do that enough. But it is at least a different muscle, a different type of writing. And so it does sort of feel like a break to be like, oh, thank God, like I could talk about this hideous see-through dress and I'm not writing dialogue. Like it's a nice break. So in that sense, I think it works really well to have the two of us, because, you know, it's both projects can still move forward without that guilt of like, you know, but as far, I'll pass the baton to my writing partner for this one.
Yeah, as far as the actual book process goes, yeah, we do write a big old outline, and it changes and morphs, and like, you know, as we work on the project, obviously it kind of changes a bit. It's a fluid document. But we have to, the analogy I always use is that like, it's like you're on a train and you have to make sure you're both going to the same destination. Because the way we write it is we will, as Heather has explained, we'll each like take a chunk, one at a time though. So like I'll write a big old chunk, and then when I get sick of it, I send it to her. She edits through my chunk and writes the next chunk and sends it back to me. I edit through her chunk, and so on and so forth. So obviously we want to make sure we're going in the same direction. Like this is the analogy I always use, but like, I don't want to kill off a character that Heather is going to need like in her 3 chapters down the road. Like we both have to make sure we're going on the same journey. But yeah, just in terms of like actual logistics, it very much is just like write, mail it off, edit, write, and then just back and forth and so on. And we're talking to each other throughout it, so it's not like a huge surprise necessarily when you get it. We each know what section of where we are in the book, so like when I get my chunk from Heather, I'm like, well, this is when blah blah happens. But it is sort of fun to get like a new chapter of this book I'm reading. I wonder what's going to happen. So that is kind of fun. Like I think, we enjoy working this way in general, clearly, but it is fun to get to like read what happens next.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that you don't often get when working on a book, and it really is seamless. I mean, it reads like a single voice. I think both books do. And I wonder if that's because of your years of collaboration on the blog and getting to, understanding how to, on the blog too, I often, if I don't read your byline of which one of you wrote it, I wouldn't necessarily know which one of you, wrote the art, wrote the commentary on the slideshow or the feature. And I'm interested in how you met and how you started working and how long you think that took to develop. It's really unique to be able to sustain a creative partnership for as long as you guys have. What do you think the secret is for you guys?
Goodness, I'm not sure. I think I would say that we were friends first. We were close friends. Like we were close friends first. And so that was always the most important thing, was like that needs to always be true. Like she has to always be in my life. And so what are we going to do as work partners that makes sure that doesn't threaten this other thing? And some of that might be because, we both also live in very different parts of LA. If we were to actually meet up to work very often, we would be in our cars all the time and we'd be working for like an hour. So it's our FaceTime spent together is probably 90% socializing. And then sometimes we have to get together for a work thing or whatever. And that's great. And I love it. But like, it's almost like we've just, by dint of where we live, the city that we live in, we sort of accidentally have drawn those lines where like the professional part of our relationship mostly happens over a computer anyway. And then when we're actually hanging out together, it's like, and then like I get to see my friend and like sometimes we'll talk about work or whatever, but it's like, I don't know. I didn't really think about that until recently, because obviously we don't get to hang out in person at all anymore. But I think, so the friendship coming first was important. And I think with that, when we started writing together, we write our own stuff for the website. It's under our own byline, but when we would write freelance for New York Magazine or anything else, it was under a joint byline. And so we had to learn pretty quickly back then how to do that in a way where our egos didn't get in the way. And I'm not saying that's always easy. Sometimes you might be like, well, did I just do a bad job on that? But like, it's not, you get over that, because at the end of the day, it's both your names on this thing. And it has to be good, and you want it to make both of you proud. And so I think early in the days of, NY Mag covering Fashion Week and stuff, you learn to just not care. Then you're like, you know what? If I wrote that joke and it wasn't as funny on paper as it was in my head, good. I'm glad you took that out, because like that didn't need to be in there. And same with the book, where it's like, if I get a section back and she changed something and I'm sort of like, oh yeah, no, I know exactly what she did. She's totally right. And like, it's helpful to just not think of it in terms of like, well, this is the part that I wrote. I don't want that to be in there. Like, you have to just be like, no, this is the book that we wrote. We have each written through each section, and it's the book that has both of our names on it. We both have to love it. We both have to be happy about it. We both have to be proud of it. Like, you can't let ego get in the way. So that's the ego, and then like preserving the friendship, I think, have been the two things that we've said are the most important things to monitor.
We also I think some of this is just luck, that I feel like Heather and I are not a particularly argumentative people. I mean, we obviously have feelings and like get mad about stuff and general, but like we're not, our working relationship is not the sort where we like are butting heads all the time.
Yeah.
And that is not my working relationship in general. That's just not really how I operate. So I think that's kind of just good fortune. And we also, prior to this, you know, we both worked in television, which is very collaborative. So I think that we're sort of well suited to continue to work in a collaborative sense. Like, you know, when you work in TV, we both worked in reality television.
Yep.
You're getting notes from producers. You're getting notes from the TV executives. You are working with an editor who always has ideas, and usually they're good. And I mean, the thing is, usually your editor is right, but like you're probably going to be salty about it. Getting notes from all kinds of people, and part of doing a good job at that is being able to work like as seamlessly as possible with a lot of other creative people.
Yeah.
But also I think it really helped us to learn to take notes well. And I think that especially television, I would say you get a lot more people who are giving you notes just to justify the fact that they have a job.
Yep.
In publishing, in my experience, obviously, I can only speak for myself. In publishing, I feel like the notes are often more actually like substantively helpful. But, you know, I think in both instances, it was useful for us to like, I think we came into writing books after working in TV, like primed to take edits, which I think is pretty useful. Well, and also writing, when we wrote for New York Magazine or Cosmo or for any of those other publications, you're going to get edits from your editor. And like, if you know, when we were writing, we used to cover Fashion Week, which is extremely fast paced. And if we got, and we worked with great editors, and we would very rarely have an issue with what they did to our pieces. But if you're always going to get like worked up about what your editor did, like you're not going to get your next piece done. So you kind of have to be like, all right, well, let's just fix this or whatever. So I think that we came into book writing with like a good background of a collaborative work experience.
That's a really, really good point. It's like all about taking notes and not taking them personally.
Yes, which is so important, and it's so interesting because you guys have such a healthy working relationship, and you write about these incredibly dysfunctional relationships that are personal but also working. I mean, really, as much as your books are, as much as both The HEIR Affair and The Royal We are rom-coms, they're also a lot about complicated family dynamics, specifically sibling relationships, especially in The HEIR Affair. But obviously, you know, we had all of that in The Royal We as well, both with Bex and Lacey and with Nick and Freddie, obviously, with Eleanor and Georgina. There's, you know, and there's the interplay of it's such an odd situation where like the family is your business and your role and the role that you're in, it's determined by birth order. It leads to this crazy sibling rivalry. Is that why you're so attracted to kind of writing about all of these complex relationships? Do you think that you know, I'd love to hear a little bit about what appeals to you about this complicated interpersonal situation.
I think it's just because complicated people are interesting. Like all that stuff is sort of logistically fascinating to me, and it's so different from the way that I did in my life that like you just sort of it's an interesting mental exercise to project yourself into that extraordinary situation. Be like, what is that like what is it like to be, you know, the younger brother who is not the heir to the throne, or like, you know, the Margaret or the Harry or the whoever who like how does that feel? Do you feel like the heir and the spare is sort of a jokey, pithy phrase, but do you take that in? Like, do you feel like a spare part? Do you feel like the backup? Like, what is it like to be born into this family where you're supposed to do a certain thing, but your role by birth is not as important as this other person's role? And so like, I just think, yes, this blending of business and family. And like, there's a part in The HEIR Affair where Bex's mother is like, you're acting like a mob boss, actually a grandmother. And like, how is that separation even possible? And you think about how like the Queen, how long the Queen's been doing what she's doing, or how long Eleanor's been doing what she's doing. And you're like, can you untwine and untangle that stuff? Like, I kind of think that the fun as a writer, I'm sure as a human person, it's not fun to live it, but the fun of a writer is in the mess, and whether you can untangle the mess and dig your characters out of the muck at all. I think that's the really fun stuff to explore. And it's just it's so different, like, from my situation in my house in California. Like, I did so I don't know what to say other than that it's an intriguing alternate reality for me.
Yeah, and I think some of it is like, I read a piece of writing advice once, and I don't remember who said it, so apologies to the person who gave this piece of advice. It was, think of the worst thing possible that could happen to your character and then do it. So I think that's a very well-known piece of advice. And, you know, I think we do that a lot. And Heather and I are big, you know, when you think about like sometimes people ask you like, what's your favorite part to write of a book? And ours are always, we love arguments. Like, I think some of it is because I am like internally very hot-headed, but I'm not really hot to like people that I care about. But there's something very satisfying about taking your hotness, not like your sexiness, your like anger, and like really getting it out. Yeah, both of them. But like, you get just like really like twisting the knife is very enjoyable.
Yeah. You guys do that so well. I mean, you can tell the TV writing background, the cinematic scope, the drama, how you structure things. We won't go so into that at the moment, just because I want to ask about something else, which is that I think you really do well on the blog. I mean, this is why I have loved your blog forever. And this is one of the big reasons that I love your books. You're so funny. You write so well. You're both so funny. And I think it's incredibly difficult to be funny, especially in fiction writing. In narrative writing, it is, I think, harder than, I've done script work as well. And like, I think it's easier to be funny in a script than it is on a page in a narrative. How did you develop that voice? Number one, what do you think is the key to writing humor and wit and this charming element? You guys always strike this good balance of, you're never mean-spirited. It's always sort of wry without being, too snarky. Like, there's just this lovely balance, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you do that. Or is it just your natural voices? You?
I think some of it, thank you, first of all, for those very kind compliments. I mean, obviously for the book, I think any book that you write goes through a lot of different stages, and you get to refine that, and you get to like take out jokes that are too broad or like are too much or aren't enough or whatever. So for the book, you obviously get to like tweak it a lot. For the website, I think it's just practice, kind of. I think some of it is just we kind of write in our own voice. But I would also say that Heather and I met originally because we were writing for a website called Television Without Pity. Mm-hmm. It was not called that at the time, but that's what it eventually became. And they did really very long form recaps of TV shows. And this was like 1999, 2000, before there were recaps on every website in the internet. And, I wouldn't say they all had the same voice, but they all had kind of a similar snarky tone with variations within. And so I do think that we kind of like came up, and this was very early on in our writing careers, 20 years ago, my God. But I do think that kind of like informed what we do on the website. And the way I always kind of explained TWOP to people was that it was like the best recaps, in my opinion, and what I tried to do with the ones that I wrote were like critical of something you really loved. And obviously I would sometimes get to points where I was like, ooh, I'm being critical of something that I now really hate, and this is not going to be as fun to read. And that's when I was like, I need to give the show to somebody else. But I think that they were always the most enjoyable when it was someone criticizing something that they actually did have like a sincere affection for. Yep. And I think we've taken some of that and taken it to Go Fuck Yourself. Like Heather and I always say, we don't want anyone to listen to us. Please don't start dressing normally. Like,
It was
God,
so boring. Wear the
please
same
don't.
dresses.
Wear sheer hot pants and like a coconut bra the instant we can do any event. Please look crazy. Like all right. So for example, Kiki Palmer, who is amazing, and you know, I'm sure you know who she is. Several years ago, she had these pants that I don't know if she made them herself or like where she got them, but they were covered in little teeny pictures of Leonardo DiCaprio. Oh, they were the greatest. They were so funny and like so ridiculous. And I was like, this is what I want. These are objectively not great, but they're so funny and like so whimsical and so wacky that like, this is what I want to see from everyone. Like, please wear your Leonardo DiCaprio pants out of the house. That's all we want.
Oh yeah.
But it's also like, yeah, like Jessica said, it's been 20 years. Like TWAP was a great way to test out your voice because you didn't have the pressure of coming up with all of the content yourself. You were riffing on a TV show. So it's not found footage, obviously, but you're riffing on something that already exists. Mm-hmm. And within those confines, they would let you do pretty much whatever you wanted. Like you could introduce, Jessica used she had storylines with her X-Files action figures and her X-Files recaps, which are legendary. There are all kinds of conceits that there was room to breathe and move and figure out tone. And then for the rest of it, I mean, we've been doing GFY for 16 years. We have not been perfect. And we will be the first to admit that, you know, we started doing that site 16 years ago. Yep. And I think a lot of the tone has just been us growing up and interrogating ourselves and being like, well, you know, you don't want to be the same person on the internet in 2020 that you were in 2004. You just don't. Like, that's not how human beings work. I'm not the same person in life as I was in 2004. And so just, you know, I think constantly making sure that what you're doing and what you're writing still is, I don't know, like appropriate or whatever, but I think we're writing in our natural voices, but I also think you have to leave room for those voices to grow up and not write to what people liked and what thought was funny in 2005. And I think that's an easy trap to fall into when you've had a website that's been running as long as ours has. And it is a trap I for sure have fallen into at times where I'm like, but I'm still doing this thing because people liked it. And I'm letting that color my perception of whether I should still be doing it. I don't need to be doing that. Like that joke is done. Like, I don't need to be doing that anymore. And like, we can evolve ourselves into something else. And so I think, you know, for any kind of writer at all, I think it's important to kind of just keep track of who you are, whether what you're writing is true to like who you are and who you want to be now versus who you were then. And like, are you writing to that audience or are you writing for you? And are you writing for now?
And I think, again, that you guys do that so well. You really have evolved with the times. And that's probably why, you know, Go Fuck Yourself is still relevant and still trucking along because it, you know, you have evolved. Like it's nice to be able to go and have this tongue-in-cheek place where you sort of laugh at the fashion and laugh at like the ridiculousness without feeling, again, like it's mean-spirited or, you know, picking people apart physically. Like that's something you guys never do. It's really, you know, it's very, it is positive, and you've kind of like, you know, people often freak out of like, well, what can we still be funny? And like, yes, like you guys have answered that question. You have to change it. You can't be, you know, you can't stay the way you always were. You might have to adapt the bit, but like you can adapt the bit and the bit will still be funny. And I want to encourage everybody, if you haven't visited gofuckyourself.com, please check it out. It's delightful. And right now you guys are doing this fabulous thing there where you're because we don't have events, we don't have celebrity events. I was like, wow, this is so smart of them. Like you guys pivoted right away and started going vintage. And I'm having so much fun looking up, like I was just looking at the Coyote Ugly premiere from like years ago, which is a big thing with me and my friends. We are I was in high school when that movie came out, and we were obsessed with the idea of going Coyote because of course we were 17 years old and ridiculous. So we all bought pleather tickets. And our big life goal was to work at the Coyote Ugly bar, which I can't, like, I'm like, that was like our our goal. So much so that when I got to New York, the first thing I did was go to, I'm forgetting the name of the actual bar.
Hogs and Heifers.
Yeah, Hogs and Heifers. And I was like, hi, can I have a job? Let me dance on the bar. And like, the guy was like, here's a job application. And I'm so embarrassed about that. But I was like, oh no, I don't actually want the job. I just wanted to get offered the job. But
Fun
like,
to get to the bar.
yeah, like
Fun.
so embarrassing. But like looking back, like you guys are going through all these old events and talking about the outfits from there. I mean, you're also talking about some vintage royal weddings. We had Diana's wedding on there, Grace Kelly. You're following up with the royals currently. Do you have a favorite royal, past, present, maybe future?
I
I'm a sucker for those
don't.
kids. That's why I said I'm a sucker for those kids. All the
Yeah, I
kids
think
are so cute.
Thank you.
I would say mine's also the children. I think they're sort of the most fun. I mean, like, I find the royals to be fascinating to observe from like a soap operatic perspective.
Yes.
I think they're really interesting. I would say I do enjoy Queen Maxima of the Netherlands was a big inspiration for a new character in the Heir Affair. So she's, if you are not familiar with her, she is a very enthusiastic seeming person with an exceptional wardrobe of hats. Yes. She loves a ginormous hat. She also likes a culotte. So she's always like enjoyable to watch.
Their royal wedding is really fun to look up because they were super schmoopy at it and also really like emotional. Yep. And just like really like she was like trembling with feeling. It's really great. I highly recommend.
She's so sweet. I love your coverage of her, and she's like the queen of the mass coordination right now. Like she has it down. She always looks fabulous. She always is over the top, the exact way I want a royal to be. You know. I also love, like, just as a little aside, I love your interpretations of Anne as like a British detective on a show. Like that's and now I can't watch The Crown without like thinking of that. And I like in my head, I'm like seeing I'm like, oh, is she looking around to see if anybody's murdered anyone?
I mean, that actress they cast for Anne is so good that I'm going to be so upset if they waste her. Like they really need to make like the Princess Anne Detective Diaries with her. And it's just like a period show. And she's so good at it.
I feel like maybe you guys need to tackle that. Maybe this needs to be your next, maybe it needs to be a YA series, The Princess Anne Detective.
Our next project. That's a great idea.
Do you think you'll tackle any royals in the future? Do you think we'll have a third another installment of Nick and Bex?
No, I would definitely like to write something else in the meantime, I think. But I mean, if you'd asked me after the royal we, I would have been like, I think I'm done. I feel like we left them in a good place and everything's fine. And that's kind of how I feel with this one. And look where we are. We did write this one. So I think I could, you never know. You never know.
But yeah, I think we're going to do something else.
Cool. Any hints on what that
might be? Because we have literally no idea. We don't know. I can't give you any hints because we don't know. But I think it's going to be interesting also just going forward, seeing how writers choose to write like in this time that we're living in. Yeah. Like, are we going to do a period piece so we don't have to deal with the fuck that it's a pandemic?
Like, not write about COVID.
Yeah. Oh. I think we're going to see from like 2021 to like 2023 a lot of historical fiction. Like suddenly everyone is set in like 1975 or whatever.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's so great. Or not so great. It's not great at all.
Yeah, I knew. Yeah.
I was like, I just said that. That was like, yeah. It's. I think that's accurate. Let me say that will happen. One last question before I let you guys go because we're running out of time. And I want to remind everyone, of course, to pick up the HEIR Affair, preferably, please, from an indie store of your choice. We love to support independent bookstores here at A Mighty Blaze. We want there to be bookstores when we go back into the world eventually, when this ends someday. We don't know when, but we would like bookstores to survive. And we will link to, we also always recommend bookshop.org. You can buy online and shop at the indie store of your choice, which is a really great way to do it. So find somewhere local near you and please purchase the HEIR Affair. And if you haven't read it the royal we, and I can't tell you, this is just the perfect I hate to use the word escape because it makes it sound less important, but like it is this. I'm so grateful to be able to go and hang out in London for a little bit and have the problems of the royal family. Real quick, last question. If you had to, gun to your head, choose Nick or Freddie.
Nick.
Wow, I thought you were both going to say Freddie. I'm a Nick too. I would choose Nick too, mostly because I want to be queen. But
I also think if you are writing the book, you have to be invested in the guy that your protagonist ends up with.
Yep.
If you don't believe, if you, the writer, don't believe that, you're gonna get yourself in big trouble. Nick,
I love that, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me once again, Heather Cox and Jessica Morgan. Please visit gofugyourself.com. Go pick up the HEIR Affair. Go pick up the Royal We. Any last words, ladies?
No, just thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. This has been awesome. And to everyone out there watching, thank you guys so much. I will see you again soon on A Mighty Blaze. We have a celebrity conversations interview coming up this afternoon. And of course, we always have programming all day, every day. It seems like we've got more and more interviews. So thank you, ladies, for being a part of this.
Thank you for having us.
And we'll see you guys next time.